Most days I don't eat breakfast and I never eat lunch. I typically eat once a day or I'll eat twice, but like within a 4 hour window. So I might eat at 3 o'clock and then eat again. I try not to eat after six, so eat again about 5:30 or 6 o'clock. But Monday through Friday, I eat a gigantic salad and it's getting bigger and bigger. I like to diversify my microbiome. So I'm eating 60 to 80 plants a day. I know that sounds crazy when I say it, or plant foods a day, and that suits me.
Tell us about your journey. What led you down this journey being vegan?
Information, facts. When I was trying to figure out the way I wanted to eat to try to obtain health, I didn't have a particular label in mind. I didn't say I wanted to be something or I wanted to be this. I just wanted to eat the foods that were going to, restore my health, maintain it, and sustain it. And whatever that was called didn't matter to me as long as it worked. So I never had a goal of becoming vegan whatsoever.
Wow.
The research I did led me to start eating different things and eliminating different things. And it just happened really organically that it just led me to being vegan.
What was the motivating factor? Were you like a young athlete trying to improve athletic performance? Were there health issues, or what were some of the things that at the time? I mean, how long ago how long have you been vegan, and how old were you when you started?
Unfortunately, it wasn't about being an athlete. It was a ladder. Like most people, I was just eating what I was eating and not thinking about the consequences. I was just eating, what I was taught to eat, what I grew up eating. But then I had started to have some health issues, nothing that was apparent to me. But I went in to get an annual checkup and they said, "Oh, you're pre-hypertensive, pre-diabetic." And then they were noticing some other things that I still never really discuss or talk about. I only like to put it out there, and we're running some tests. And so it was really fear that led me to say, man, what can I do? I need to do something to, I don't know what I can control, but whatever I can control, I'm going to control those things. And that was what I eat and my lifestyle, how I exercise, my sleep, my mindset, those kind of things. And so that was about 18, 19 years ago, started to change my diet. But again, it was very gradual thing. So it's not like all of a sudden I was eating healthy. It was just the beginning of it. I tell everybody, like, if you want to start eating healthy, if you go, what can I do to eat healthy? And I say, well, you got to have the want to, and you got to have the know-how. Because if you have one without the other, it's not going to work. If you really want to eat healthy, but you don't know what that means and how to prepare it and what to buy, you're lost. And if you know what to do, but you don't have the motivation to do it, it's never going to happen. So I had the want to, I didn't have the know-how. That's what was missing for me. And so you say, what did I do? What did I change? I changed what I knew. At the time, I said, okay, no more soda. Instead of eating white bread, I'll eat whole wheat. And I literally thought these things were going to be beneficial. And I mean, I guess to some degree they were, but it was nothing major. I was just tweaking things. And then the more I researched, the more studies I read, the more books that I read, I started saying, wow, okay, so I need to get all refined foods out of my diet. Wait a minute. So if I don't eat sugar, then how am I going to eat a dessert? If I don't eat refined wheat, how am I going to eat bread? So it
Mhm.
was out of necessity that I had to figure out, hey, I still want to eat these foods. I still want to have a diet that I enjoy, but I want to get these ingredients out. How do I do that? And there was
Wow.
no one out there that had the answer for me.
Looking at your videos, I mean, of all the chefs I've seen, you seem to be one of the most knowledgeable ones. And one question I was going to ask, what was your educational background? You're getting into that. It seems like it was independent study. Apparently, you don't have a background in nutrition or anything. You just did independent study. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty correct. And so I had no intentions to get any kind of a degree or anything like that because I'm pretty easy as far as what I need. I don't need a lot of money to be happy. I don't need so I was just doing what I do and I was happy. But what happened was that, when people saw my transformation, people who knew me, they said, well, what did you do? And then when I would tell them about it, they would say, man, you should be teaching this. It's really motivational to hear you talk about it and you have a lot of passion. And so I actually did go back to school for right just under 2 years. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get a biology degree and then I'm going to be a dietitian and then I'm going to be a plant-based dietitian or I'll teach nutrition on the college level. But then when I started taking nutritional courses in college, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not my approach. This is not my approach. And so there was some conflict there. So I said, I can't go that route. I enjoyed school because I enjoy learning. And then I was like, so now how do I do this? How do I share this? And people kept saying, do it on social media. Now, mind you, I wasn't on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I didn't do. I mean, I just was not a social media person. And so I was like, nah, I'm not doing social media. That's crazy. People kept saying it to me. I said, all right, let me try this. But here's the thing, and you hit right on it. What I wanted to do, and I've never said this before, but what I want to do on social media was just talk about nutrition. I didn't want to cook anything. Just want to talk about nutrition. And everybody said, you're going to bore people out of their mind. Instagram is quick. TikTok is quick. You can't go on there talking about this stuff. You got to do something exciting. Why don't you make food? And I was like, make food? I said, I just eat salad and look with quinoa. They said, I make food. And so that was the catalyst for me to say, okay, so what kind of foods do people make and how can I make them differently? I was self-taught. I went into the kitchen and started trying to make things and without oil and without wheat. And before you know it, I got pretty good at it.
And the videos you make are just remarkable. I want to get into the food prep side of it. And so, first and foremost, I've seen the spectrum of things you do. I haven't seen everything. I've seen a good number of things. But I'm going to ask you about juicing and raw food prep. Tell us about juicing, smoothies, and then raw food prep, and then cooked food prep. What's your breakdown in those areas?
The juicing is an interesting one, and it takes a little context because I really only juice about once a week. So juicing is not something that if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I want to really eat healthy," I wouldn't suggest juicing unless they needed it. And when I say they needed it, I mean it in this sense. I didn't like salad, I didn't like nuts, I didn't like seeds, I didn't like quinoa, I didn't like mushroom, I didn't like any of the stuff that I eat daily now. And juicing was very, very important for me because I needed the nutrients that I wasn't getting, but I didn't want to be chewing and eating all that food. Part of my health journey before I started eating healthy, I started juicing healthy.
Mhm.
But mentally, that really helped me to know, okay, I'm juicing kale and I'm juicing, all these healthy vegetables, and I'm feeling the difference. So I think that there is a lot of benefit potentially in juicing. Unfortunately, a lot of people today, when they say they want to juice, they go and grab, the oranges and they go and grab the mangoes and they go and grab these high sugar things, remove the fiber. So now you drink that juice full of fructose and sugar, and you're spiking your blood sugar. I started using a term on my page, responsible juicing. And by that, I mean that, 80 to 90% of what you juice is a vegetable, a low sugar vegetable. And then you sweeten it with a low sugar fruit like Granny Smith apple, which is the lowest sugar apple there is, a modest amount of berries, and sometimes a beet. So I'm in favor of what I call responsible juicing, or juicing as a way to bridge a gap for someone who just isn't ready to go into eating these vegetables all the time and eating these fruits, but they're willing to turn that glass up and drink it. So you're getting those nutrients, you're not getting the fiber, but you're not getting the fiber anyway. If you're eating a poor diet, you're not getting the fiber anyway. So if you won't eat those vegetables and get the fiber, at least you can juice those vegetables and get the nutrients. So that's kind of my approach to juicing. But to me, again, it's just like a bridge gap because once you can start eating them, that's ideal. And then you just juice here and there and you do it responsibly. As far as raw food prep, I don't have any raw food prep videos on my YouTube or my IG, but I have my Healthy Vegan app that's going to be coming out really soon. And in that, I do have some meal prep videos. So that's about the extent of that. Not a lot of raw prep that I've shown on my social media platforms.
So it will be on your app though. Some raw food meal prep or not.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I've had several people say, "How are you going to have some meal prep in the app?" And so I was like, "Yeah, let me do that." So I certainly will have that.
Gotcha. Now, I've seen a number of the recipes you've done, and they're remarkable. And the question I have for chefs in general, because it seems as though you're creating these recipes from scratch. I mean, you're like a chemist. What is the approach? For example, you made this dish. It's not a dish, but it's a substitute for tofu. I think you use mung beans or something like that. Walk us through the approach when you take. It seems like something you just taking ingredients out of space and you're saying, okay, let me try this, that. What is your approach to that? I mean, you start, it seems like and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're starting with a blank sheet of paper.
That really is unique to different dishes as far as how I approach it. The one that you mentioned, you're right. I call it mung fu, right? So it was my answer to tofu because, organic edamame, organic soybeans is super healthy food, super health promoting food, and I will eat that. But when you start processing soybeans, the method of, they have something called a defoamer that they put in tofu because when they cook the beans, it creates a lot of foam. So they put this defoamer, which is a slew of chemicals I don't want to be putting in my body. And they're able to do that and still call it organic. So I don't eat any processed soy, but I do eat organic soybeans, but I still want it tofu, so to speak. So I started looking at beans that I could use to try to replace it. Now you can go and buy pum food, which is made out of pumpkin seeds from the store, but I wanted something different with less fat than that. Fava beans would work, but I don't like the fava beans. So I use mung beans. But as far as how to come up with the recipe, I will go and look at other creators and they're making things similar to what I want to make, but they're using the oil or they're using the wheat or they're using the sugar. But I'm seeing the process and go, okay, so this is how you make it. So how could I make this and omit that or omit this? And so it just depends on the food. And then some things, like a sweet potato pie is one of my favorite examples. My grandmother taught me how to make sweet potato pie, and it had milk and it had butter and it had sugar, it had oil in the crust, and I loved it. It's one of my favorite things. So I just went in the kitchen one day and said, okay, how can I make this without putting those things in it? And I said, okay, well, I can sweeten it with dates. I know that the sugar is never an issue, but how am I going to make this crust without wheat? And so I go and look, I'll Google how to make a crust without wheat, and it'll say these are the different flours. So it's a lot of research, trial and error, and then my favorite part, tasting it to see what it's like.
Now, often we get the complaint, I imagine people may have mentioned to you, the expense of eating healthy or the expense of eating a healthy vegan diet. What's your response to that?
Well, things like expensive or relative to, to who you're talking to and what your goals are and what your priorities are. But some of the healthiest foods are the cheapest foods in the store. I mean, beans, $1.29 a can, and that's buying them organically. You can get them for cheaper than that. Lentils aren't expensive. Mushrooms aren't expensive. Button mushrooms aren't expensive. The common white mushrooms aren't expensive. And oranges and bananas aren't. There's a lot of foods that you can eat that are really, really cheap, that are the most health promoting foods out there. It does become a discrepancy in price when you look at things like pasta, for example. If you're buying a whole wheat pasta, which I call a disease promoting food, you might be able to get that for, $1.29 a pack. The pasta I buy is made from either chickpeas or from red lentils. It's a one ingredient pasta, no fillers, nothing, just the beans or just the lentils. That might cost you $3.99, $4.69 a box. So relatively it's expensive, but that extra $2.45 you're paying over the whole wheat pasta is the best $2.45 you could ever spend, right? Because you're investing in your health $2 or $3 at a time. I mean, what could be more important? So, but at the same time, I'm empathetic towards people who are working on a budget because I was once in that situation. But again, beans and lentils and sweet potatoes and, onions, and there are lots of healthy things out there that aren't expensive.
What are the final words you have to our community, in particular African Americans who are trying to improve their health? What parting words of wisdom and motivation could you leave us as we end this interview?
Well, one thing I always like to make sure that I say to people is that you don't have to be vegan to be healthy. I'm not vegan because it's the only way to eat a healthy diet. You can have some meat in your diet and still eat a healthy diet. What you want to do first and foremost is get the refined products out, the refined wheat, the refined sugar, even refined white rice. You want to get the oil out to a lesser degree. It's not as important as other two, but you want to get the oil out. And you want to try to keep, and again, this is how I approach it. I'm not a doctor or a dietitian, but you want to keep your meat intake to no more than 10 to 15% of the most percentage of calories. And that way, your IGF-1, which is a hormone. IGF-1, when you eat a lot of meat, it raises your IGF-1. It's a growth hormone that when we're young and adolescent, we need that growth hormone. As we get older, we need it, but to a much lesser degree. When you eat things like meat, it elevates your IGF-1 and it's a growth promoter. And so when you have, these cancerous cells in your body that we all have and our immune system goes and it takes care of those cancerous cells. But when your IGF-1 levels are elevated,
Yeah.
those cells proliferate a lot faster. And so you're more likely to have problems with things like cancer and mutations, et cetera. So that's why I say, it's not just animal products. You can't eat them, but you want to minimize them and have mostly a whole food plant-based diet with a little bit of meat. And then if you want to be vegan, do it responsibly and know that you have to supplement B12 for sure. Know that you're probably going to have to supplement omega-3s, whether you're vegan or not, but definitely if you're vegan. And just know your things. Remember, not just to want to, but to know how. Look at my channel, look at channels like mine. Get my app, get apps like mine, get all the information you can so that you're making informed choices and that, you're taking care of yourself, however you eat.
Well, this is impressive. I mean, I'm really impressed with the work you're doing. Thanks for doing this interview, and I learned a lot from your channel, so keep up the great work, and look forward to seeing you in the next video, and look forward to working with you in the future, so hope we can talk about that.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks. I appreciate what you do. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, so thanks for having me on. It was my pleasure for sure.